Hello, my friends. Thank you so much for joining me. My name is Kaylee. This is the Tea House, and today we are going to be making homemade bread. Now, this bread is a little special because it is from the Breadbecker's recipe book here. I chose this one. It was only like $10 when I ordered it. I think it's about $11 with free shipping. I recently got on the fresh milled flour journey, and I am here to show you exactly how I make Sue's basic bread recipe. This video was requested. I am part of the, I think it's Milling Whole Grains group on Facebook, and someone had requested if anyone had just the basic recipe, step-by-step, very detailed, slow instructions on how to make the bread. And I said, hey, I'm willing to do that. Just give me a couple days. So that is, in fact, what I'm doing. I did let them know that I have converted this recipe. Sue uses cups, so measuring cups, and I have converted everything to grams, which is a weight measurement instead of a volume measurement. I find it more precise. So I have my little scale here. I have had this for years. The first thing I'm going to do, what I like to do is, this is hard red wheat. I actually get this from a local company to me in Colorado, but I know that Azure Standard has it. I know that Breadbecker's has it. I know that Pleasant Hill Grain has. There's all sorts of options to source your wheat. I can give you some more if you need or want it. But so what I'm doing first, so in this recipe, it states that you need 4 to 4.5 cups of freshly milled flour. Now, I took 4.5 cups of freshly milled flour and I weighed it first, and then I figured out what the grams were for that, and I came out to, I adjusted it slightly, and I came out to about 610 grams. These measurements may not work exactly for you, but this is what has worked for me in Colorado. So I am measuring out 610 grams of wheat. So the first one that I used was hard red wheat. This is hard white. And then this last little bit, I have about 550 grams there. I choose to do just kind of what I consider an ancient grain of my choice. So I have rye here, so I will do the last little bit in rye. Oh, that's actually perfect. And we will get to measuring the rest of our ingredients. Now, I chose to grind, again, 660 grams of flour because I have this mason jar of flour that lives in my freezer, and this is what I use for dusting. This is what I use for other things that I may just need a couple tablespoons of flour, breading chicken, that sort of stuff. This is technically, you can't read it probably, but this is soft white wheat, which is fine. I'm gonna measure it and throw it in here as well. But anything that I don't use from this, when I get it measured, will go into this mason jar. And I always like rotating what I have in the freezer. I personally make my bread in a Breadbecker, and I do this for pretty much one reason, and it's convenience. I have 2 small children, and I can't always guarantee that I have 20 or 40 or 60 minutes child-free where I have both hands to knead dough and proof dough and shape dough and those sorts of things. The bread machine does everything for me. I could, if I wanted to, I could also bake the dough in the bread machine. I choose to not do that. I will actually, I'll show you, but I put it in loaves and then put that in the oven. But I do like this option when I am short on time, and I can just say, hey, I'm going to put this, in, and it takes an hour and a half to get it all mixed. And then after that, I can just slide it into the oven. So that is a really good convenience for me personally. But you would use the same method if you were using like a KitchenAid mixer or even just like a bowl in your hands. So the next step, I always do my liquid ingredients first. So in this case, that is going to be the water, and you need 12 ounces of water, which comes out to 340 grams. I think I switched it just a little bit that's not quite 12 ounces, but that was what I started with. And then our honey, I do 125 grams. So I'm going to just zero out my scale and do 125 grams of honey. This is wildflower honey. I actually get it at the same place that I get my wheat in bulk. This is also a Colorado product. I prefer to stay as local as possible while still being cognizant of the cost of things. The last liquid ingredient is going to be coconut oil. I use coconut oil for my oil option. I prefer coconut oil over some other oils. I don't care for the taste of olive oil, and avocado oil is more expensive than coconut oil. So if I wanted to, I could melt this down, but I find that it actually mixes in quite well. The flour is slightly hot, and as the bread maker mixes, it's going to kind of increase in temperature. So I find that this mixes just fine. So you would do 55 grams of oil. Now, if you wanted to do butter, you would need to do a quick Google search or something like that. Butter does have water in it, so you need to account for that and adjust your water accordingly and your fat accordingly, because it is not a 1-for-1 as coconut oil is a complete, I mean, it's 100% fat, just like olive oil, just like avocado oil. So to this, I am now going to add my flour. Now I need 610 grams of flour. So the first thing I'm going to do is open this jar. This is the one that was in my freezer. And I'm going to start with this. Okay, that is 153. And now if I work quickly enough, I won't have to do the math to figure out how much additional flour I need. So here is all of that milled flour. And I just like to mix it up because it was a combination of red wheat, white wheat, and the rye. And then I'm just gonna fill until 610. Next up, we are going to talk about some of the optional things to put into the bread. Flaxseed, sunflower lecithin, and vital wheat gluten. I do all of these. I do not choose to do the egg because the less that I can add to it, the better. And in the future, when I'm done with this bottle of sunflower lecithin, I will not be repurchasing this from Azure. I didn't find that it made that big of a difference, but the flaxseed and the vital wheat gluten, I do feel make a good difference. Also, the flaxseed, given that I am a mom of a baby and breastfeeding, flaxseed is very, very high in some of those nutrients that I need, so I always like adding flaxseed. I buy it whole from Azure and just store it in mason jars, as you see. I don't really measure it. I just fill in this coffee grinder until I feel that there's enough, and then I grind it up and put it in. Optional ingredient number 2, sunflower lecithin. I did about 1 tablespoon of the liquid lecithin, which is a little different. She has 2 tablespoons of the powdered. Again, I don't see that big of a difference when I use this, so I don't know that I'll be repurchasing it. And 1 tablespoon is roughly 12 grams. There we go. And then the vital wheat gluten. She said that 1 teaspoon is optional, and I also do about a teaspoon, and that is about 3 grams. And now salt, 2 teaspoons. I use Redmond's real salt. 2 teaspoons is 14 grams. And last but not least, yeast. So she uses fresh yeast. I use dry active yeast. You will need to do a comparison depending on what your what kind of yeast you're using. Again, a quick Google search will tell you kind of the difference between how much to use and whatnot. I use 6 grams of dry active yeast. Now that we have all of everything measured out and put into this, again, I use a bread maker. This is just a cheap bread maker. I actually got this for free. I'm part of some Facebook buy nothing groups or free groups, and I got this from there. It works great. The option, if you have this Hamilton Beach one, the dough cycle is the one that I'm going to choose. And I just push start. So I lifted up the lid, just so you can kind of see there's a paddle at the bottom, and it just kind of mixes. If you are using your KitchenAid is going to do the exact same thing, or any other mixer. This is just going to also do the rise portion of the baking process for me. So I don't have to watch it. I don't have to set a timer to punch it down or anything like that. It'll just do everything for me up until the baking portion. Now, as you can see, this has been mixing for only 3 or 4 minutes, and it's pretty well combined, obviously with the help, a little bit of help of the spatula. And this is still a pretty sticky, kind of wet dough. This is exactly where I want it. I don't want to add any more flour. I don't want to add any additional water or oil. This is perfect. I will check back with you in about an hour and a half when that has risen. Now, if you don't have a mixer that you are using and you're doing this by hand, once everything has been fully incorporated, you have kneaded the dough for, I would say, about a good 10 minutes. Then you would put a damp kitchen towel over the bowl and let it rise until it doubles in size. I am back. It has been about an hour and a half, and this dough is very pliable. It has risen, it has fallen a little bit. So I'm going to take this out, divide it into 2 loaves, and put it in a loaf pan to continue to rise for a second time. I have my loaf pans here. I have a glass pan that I have just lightly sprayed with some avocado oil, and then I have a ceramic pan. This is the Pampered Chef brand. 2 options here. You can take your scale back out and you can divide this loaf, almost directly evenly in half by weight so that you have 2 very perfect loaves. That's just not really how I roll. So I typically just roll it into a log like this, and then I take half and then I, pinch and break. And well, we have 1 loaf and we have 2 loaves. So let's talk about shaping our loaves. Now, this bread that I traditionally make, the Sue Becker's bread recipe, is pretty dense. If you want a lighter dough, you can add some potato starch. You can add some, different types of wheat. There are all sorts of ways to get it to be less dense, but we actually like it this way. My daughter just, takes a piece and sticks it right in her mouth, and we have no issue making sandwiches or toast in the morning. So what I'm doing here is, I'm flattening it out, and then I roll one side over and kind of push it down, and then the other side over. I see a lot of people make their loaves look pretty in a lot of sort of ways. This is what I have been doing for quite a while. And then you just want, obviously, the top which was the bottom, but this is the top. And then you just bring your loaf pan over and you just kind of fit it in. So we are going to let this, I haven't preheated the oven yet, so we are going to let this rise for about half an hour. And then I'm going to preheat the oven, following her guidelines in terms of temperature, 350, and time, about 30 minutes. But I am going to let both of these rise for about half an hour. Now in Colorado, right where it is, this came out of the bread maker pretty warm, so I'm not going to cover this with a towel or anything. I want it to hopefully rise about halfway up. Kind of depends, but most of the time it gets there. These loaves have been rising on the counter. It was a little longer than half an hour because I had something in the oven, but they have risen about halfway, so we are going to put them in the oven at 350 degrees for half an hour. Our loaves of bread are out of the oven. This one had a toddler finger in it, so, you know, sometimes you win some, you lose some. I did release this pan just slightly along the edges to get a clean release, and I do that with a little offset spatula, and they are cool enough to touch. So that one, they're still hot, like the bread itself is still warm, but the pans are cool enough to touch. And sometimes you need, well, maybe the edges are cool enough to touch. Need a little. All right. So these will cool completely, and then they will be sliced up because we have a toddler and a baby. We do pretty small sandwiches, but these definitely work for our family. If you want a higher rise, you would want to add more liquid or less flour. So the density comes from the weight, obviously, and then potentially more yeast as well. So you want the leavening, you want the hydration to be pretty good, and then you want less flour. So we don't mind these at all. This is the perfect size for a sandwich in our family. I hope that this video was helpful to some of you. If you feel so inclined, I would love for you to like and subscribe to the channel. I also have an Instagram page, so feel free to check that out. I also made cinnamon rolls with this exact same dough recipe. You just, instead of shaping them into loaves, you would roll it out, cover it with butter, cinnamon, and brown sugar. That's kind of been mixed together, and then cut it into 12 equal pieces and put it in a Pyrex pan, like a 9x13 pan. And then what I do is I cover the bottom of it with heavy cream or half and half or milk, kind of whatever cream or dairy product that I have, and it makes like this really gooey sauce. Oh, it's just so good. So yeah, definitely check out that option as well. That is also in the red Breadbecker's recipe book. And feel free to leave me any questions down below. I love to hear feedback and see what you like and didn't like, and constructive criticism and all those things. Tell me if this loaf of bread would work for your family, or if you would want something higher, less dense, and you know, a little easier maybe to eat, more traditional to the grocery store loaves. I hope that you are having a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.